Brian, what's up, brother? So great to see you. Glad you could join me on the podcast. I know you're in the car, but you know what? Who cares? Sometimes we just need to make things happen. And that's what we do as men. So I'm glad you're here.
Let's go. We embrace reality, do what needs to get done. I appreciate you, man. Been really
Yeah,
looking forward to our chat.
it's interesting because, I want to put together a good show, a highly produced show, a high quality show. I want the audio to look good and the video to look good, and all of that's important. But I think what resonates with, at least just anecdotally, listening to the guys that tune into our podcast, is real conversations. Guys having conversations about what struggles they're dealing with. I don't know why you're in the car. Maybe you just had to pick up your daughter because she's sick or something like that.
Dude,
It's like life happens,
I'll
man.
tell you, dude, dentist. My
A
wife
dentist. There
asked
you
me to go
go.
to this one dentist, dude. We're 90 minutes away. I've rescheduled twice, and these guys couldn't get me in for another like 3 months. I'm like, all right, I gotta
Yeah.
go. So there you
Yep.
go.
That's how it goes. So, guys, look, if you're looking at somebody and you think that, Brian has it all figured out or I have it all figured out, I don't want to speak for you, but I think I can be so bold to say, no, we don't have it all figured out. Trust me, we do not have it all figured out.
I will affirm that. If my wife was here, she can tell you that that is in fact true. So let's go, right?
You got a new book coming out, man. It's called Arete, and I'm very interested in the word itself. I'm a big fan of Ed Milet and Andy Frisella. Both of them are friends of mine, and they've got their Arete syndicate. And I actually don't know much about the word other than maybe some level of excellence. I think it's a Greek word.
Yeah.
So if you would please give me the definition of arete and why you decided to write a book or at least cover the topic of arete.
Yeah, dude. Well, before I wrote a book, I got this little blur thing on. So you can't see. I got an
Yeah, I
Arete
saw it.
tattoo on my right arm. So Arete, you're exactly right. We translate the ancient Greek word as excellence or virtue. But the way I
Okay.
like to frame it up is if you ask the ancient, Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, or the Roman Stoics, Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, how to live a good life, a good, noble, heroic life, they'd answer you in a single word. That word is arete. So again,
Mm-hmm.
it means excellence or virtue, but it has a deeper meaning, something closer to being your best self, moment to moment to moment. And in any given moment, you're capable of being this. And if you're actually being this, and there's a gap between who you could have been and who you're actually being, that's where regret, anxiety, disillusionment, depression exists. When you close the gap, you're living with arete. You're being your
Mm-hmm.
best self, and you feel this deep sense of meaning, purpose. It was the summum bonum of the ancient world, the greatest good, to close that gap, to be your best self. They call that eudaimonia. But anyway, that's the one word summation of my life's work. What all ancient wisdom traditions, philosophers, faith traditions, and modern science says is how you live a good life.
Yeah, that's cool. As you were talking about the gap from where you want to be or who you could be to who you actually are. I know a lot of guys that have listened to the podcast have heard me talk about the integrity gap. And that's exactly
That's
what
it.
you're talking about right now. And we all
100%.
have it. It all exists. And the larger it is, the more depressed, the more anxious, the more potentially even suicidal that you are. The guys that I work with on a daily basis who are really, really struggling with self-confidence issues. I know you talk a lot about that in the book.
Yep.
Struggle with interpersonal relationships with spouses and friends and kids. Their integrity gap is
Yep.
so wide.
Yep.
It's really difficult for them to function with any sort of mastery in their life, which is another point that you talk often about as well.
100%. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's it. Are you living in integrity with your highest ideals? Now, you'll never do it perfectly, but you got to do it more and more consistently. And as you know, I talk a lot about forging anti-fragile confidence. And
Mm-hmm.
if you want confidence, the word means intense trust, confidere, with intense trust. If you and I are going to trust each other, I got to do what I say I'm going to do. If I don't show up for our time together today, you may give me one pass, man, but if I did it again, you'd be like, I don't trust this guy, and you shouldn't trust me. So if you want to have trust in yourself, you want to have confidence in yourself, you got to do what you say you will do. You say you're going to eat, you're going to move, you're going to sleep in certain ways. You're going to spend time with your kids in a certain way. You're going to treat your spouse in a certain way, and you don't. You're eroding your trust every single time you allow that integrity gap to come into play. And stated positively, when you turn the corner and you start more consistently doing those little things, your life changes. And again, I
Yeah.
talk about moving from just forging what I call anti-fragility, which we might talk about. But yeah, integrity gap is what it's all about.
It is really interesting to see guys who will do something as seemingly insignificant as hit their snooze the first thing in the morning. And then they'll wonder why the rest of their day goes bad. It's like, well,
Yep.
the very first thing you did is you lied to yourself. You told yourself you're going to get out of bed at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever your time is. And the very first action of the day was a lie. It was a deceit. You deceived yourself. And the language that I use, and I'm not pointing fingers, I talk to myself like this too, is a little bit of our soul dies when we do that.
Dude, and again, Abraham Maslow says, the great humanistic psychologist, he came up with the whole hierarchy of needs, the self-actualizing individual. That dude's intense. He said that every single time you deviate from what you're capable of doing, it makes an imprint on your consciousness. And those
Mm,
days that start with a snooze, then they go here, 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 and you took all these steps back. Those are the days you want to numb yourself. That's the day you binge drink, you binge eat, you binge watch, you do whatever you do to ignore the fact that you were so far out of integrity. Now, again, stating it positively, it's the little things. It's the John Wooden put on your socks, get the little tiny
mm.
mundane things right. You build this trust, you dominate the fundamentals, and you can fundamentally and permanently change your life as you recreate that trust with yourself, deepen your relationships, and all that stuff.
I can't remember who it was. There was a naval admiral, I believe, who did a speech and then eventually wrote a book called "Make Your Bed." And
Make your
I
bed, dude. Admiral
and I was
McRaven, head of SOCOM. I
McRaven.
mean,
That's what
what's
it
yeah.
was. I was like, this is total bullshit. I'm like, this is so dumb. Make your bed. Come on. Like, this guy can clearly give us a better message than this. And, the more I dive into that, the more I make my bed, the more I do the little things, whether it's, seeing a piece of trash on the ground and picking it up, or, instead of stepping over it like we often do, or if I'm, painting my room, I could say, leave that corner. It's good enough. No, it's not good enough. Like, do all the little things exceptionally well because every little thing counts to the fullest.
So, dude, I'm seeing on your wall, you got protect, and I want to talk about that because that's what my business heroic is all about. But that was Admiral McRaven, head of SOCOM. I gave a talk for the U.S. men's national team the other day before they played their game, and they wanted me to come in and talk about anti-fragile confidence. And I introduced the head coach to another friend of mine, who's the former head of Naval Special Warfare. He ran SEAL Team 6, DevGru, when we did the Minwad mission and all that stuff. Anyway, he's talking about, the U.S. team wants to win the World Cup in 2026. That's as close to as impossible as you're going to get. You know what I mean? Let's go. That's a
Yeah.
big climb. So
Yeah.
he and I traded some texts with the head coach, and he said, if you want to achieve nonlinear things, aka do what many see to be impossible, it's the tiniest little things that matter the most. Those tiny little marginal gains, those little things that you don't think matter, become the things that separate you from your prior self and connect you to that best version of you. Um, and it's exciting. These are not chores. This isn't another list of chores that you have to do. This is a simple formula through which you can express the best version of yourself. But you got to be intense. You got to be willing to be all in, stay grounded, obviously, but show up like you mean it. And life takes on a whole different meaning, and we've been blessed to serve people at the highest end of, the military and executives and sports and whatnot, and people who don't want to get out of bed tomorrow morning. And it's the same exact game plan. Be your best self moment to moment to moment. And when you do that, some powerful things start to happen.
Well, and it's interesting too, because you can see it at the smallest level. So one thing I've always really enjoyed doing is coaching my sons' baseball and football and basketball teams. About the time they get to 7, 8 years old, they outgrow my basketball coaching because that's not my sport. Baseball, football, I could coach them all the way through high school, but basketball, I'm like, all right, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. You need to go with a better coach at this point. And so I'm coaching my youngest son's basketball team. He's 7 years old. And there's this little kid on the team, and he's the stud, right? Like, he's the stud of the team. And every team has one, and every team knows who the stud is. And the reason he's a stud, granted, yeah, I know there's some personality in there. There's probably just some tenacity. There's just some mental and physical development that you could attribute it to. But the kid plays at home.
Mm.
He's got a basketball hoop at home. Dad or mom is out there every day throwing, working on passes, working on shots, talking about mentality. This is a 7, 8-year-old kid, and we see it at that level. And then we don't think, I'm
Yeah.
42 years old,
Yeah.
that at 42 years old, it applies to a guy like myself,
Yeah.
when clearly it applies to a 7-year-old, let alone a
Yeah.
42-year-old.
Dude, so Angela Duckworth wrote the book on grit,
Grit.
right? So the
Yeah.
science of grit. And my son's into chess. And so he 6 months ago, got into it. Or a year ago he got into it. 6 months ago he just started destroying me. So we reached that point. It's like, don't listen to anything I have to say about chess. You listen to your coach for that. But I'm pretty good at the other stuff. But what
Yeah.
so peak performance, etc. But Angela Duckworth says that talent matters. Talent is the speed with which you pick up a skill. So, my son has an aptitude for chess. That kid probably has an aptitude for basketball. But talent does nothing without effort. Talent times effort, or reps on the small things, equals skill. Skill times more effort equals achievement. So effort counts twice in everything we want to do. And then it's just a matter of time and reps. What do you want in your life? What do you need to do to get it? Start paying the price. And then the harder you work, the more little things you do, the faster you pay that price, the more you're going to achieve the results that you want to achieve in any aspect of your life, whether it's a 7-year-old on the basketball court or us, in the metaphorical or real boardroom. These things are not that complicated. And then the way that I frame it up for the guys and women we work with is, think back to a time in your past when you were at your best. We've all experienced peak moments, whether it was a day, a week, a month, a year, or a decade. What were you doing when you were at your best? Make a list of the things you were doing, the things you weren't doing, and what's one thing you're currently not doing that you were doing when you were at your best. Get on that. Make your prior best your new baseline. Like that and anti-fragility were the two things that the soccer guys like the most, and one of the most is, if you have achieved a high level of success in the past, don't give up your gains. Know what that was that you were doing, create a protocol, and then work it, especially when you don't feel like it, which is a whole nother chat about emotional stamina and how you actually create anti-fragility. But yeah, man, it really isn't that complicated. As they say, it's simple but not easy. But it's also exciting because when you get it and you start executing it, things can change.
Are there things, as you talk about that list, are there certain things that high performers execute on, not just specific to their craft, but just
Yep.
generalized? I think we were talking about Andy Frisella earlier, and so I'm sure you're familiar with Andy, and you've got a program like 75 Hard, where it's, drink so much water, read 10 pages a day, get 2 workouts a day, those things. That's the list. And I know that when I was doing that list,
Yep.
performance was through the roof. Are there
Yep.
things that high performers do every day that make a huge difference, regardless of what their skill set or their chosen, profession or craft is?
Yeah, so I like to split the fundamentals up into two things. The idiosyncratic, this is your craft, this is what you need to do, and then the kind of general and universal. But I would offer that the individual listening to this right now, think about what you did when you were at your best. I can give you, and I'll talk about eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, and focusing your mind, which are the 5 fundamentals I stress again and again and again. But at the end of the day, we've each experienced a really high level of performance in our energy, our work, and our love. And we just need to slow down long enough to do an inventory of the things that we were doing and then do them. And I come back to that one exercise all the time, which is, what's the number one thing I could start doing that if I started doing it would most change my life? And what's the number one thing I know I need to stop doing that if I stop doing it would change my life? I've done that when I've been really experiencing hard times, and I do it every single time I want to go next level, which is right now. So every day I'm asking myself that question, and I'm getting the data and I'm looking at what works and what doesn't, et cetera. But again, the eating, the moving, the sleeping, the breathing, the focusing, getting your energy dialed in, becoming more productive, and then deepening your personal relationships are the 3 areas that I focus in: energy, work, and love. We call it the big 3. And then it's obvious stuff. We all know what we could be doing nutrition wise. The question, are you doing it? Sleep is my personal both kryptonite when I'm not paying attention to it and superpower when I am. So I get sleep. I sleep like I'm a world-class athlete, dude, and I train like I'm an athlete, and I show up with my physical presence that way. And then work, I've got certain things I do. I'm creative before reactive. So I don't open up my inbox, whether it's text or email, until I've done the most important thing that day. I pause, I think about what I need to get done, and I do that, what we call it, what's important now, my win. And then I do some very basic things in my relationship. I recommit to being with my wife. We've been together for 17 years. I want to be with her for at least 51 years. I recommit to that and being best friends with my adult kids every single morning. And then I create little micro moments with my wife and with my kids, without my phone, where I'm just connected to them. Very, very simple things that we architected our heroic app around this to create a protocol that you execute consistently. Those are a few of the fundamental things that we teach, but I'll emphasize again, we each have a certain set of things we do when we're at our best. And my big thing is I need to help you figure out what it is, and then help you light your own fire, and then do it every single day, especially on the days you don't feel like it. That's when things change.
Yeah, I mean, I already know what mine are. My issues are sleeping because I don't like to go to sleep at night. It almost feels like a waste of time. Like I know how important it is. I know the science. I've read all the data. I've gone through it. Everybody tells me how important it is. I'm like, oh, I don't want to sleep. Like I want to send this email out, or I want to read the rest of this book, or I want to, watch that show or call that person. So it's that. The other one is nutrition because I'm busy.
Yep.
So I'm running from appointment to this to that. I'm like, all right, let me just run through the drive-through at, the fast food place of choice instead of, meal prep. Those are my big issues. I know if I stop doing that, that alone would make a huge difference. But the other thing that gets to me, and I want to know what you think about this, is we're bombarded with minutia. Like today I had to go to the DMV, and I set up an appointment at the DMV, which is a pretty cool service. My appointment was at 10:40, but still they didn't call me till 10:55. So 15 minutes late, even past the appointment. The lady there surprisingly she was a pleasant lady, which isn't, a place that's notorious for pleasant people. And it's like, and then the other day, some woman, she turned into the wrong lane and she slammed into my car. And, now I got to drive to the neighboring town, and I got to take my car into the collision center so they can give me an estimate on the truck. And it's all this little bullshit that comes up that, man, if I could recapture 2 hours of my day that isn't filled with nonsense, then yeah, I could eat a little better, or I could sleep a few more hours, or I could read a few more pages of the Bible, or whatever, Arete, or whatever book I was reading at the time.
Yeah, so for me, I know what it feels like to feel highs and lows. So I wanted to end my own life 25 years ago. That's where I was. My dad
Mm.
struggled with alcohol. I know we've got some stuff in common with the kind of my father was there physically, but not emotionally, good man, but worked in a grocery store for 39 years, struggled with alcohol. I would have too if I had 5 kids, trying to raise 5 kids, going to Catholic school.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt. No
Uh,
doubt.
his dad struggling with alcohol, ended his own life, etc. So
Mm.
I jokingly say I lost the lottery on the genetics and the environment on that one. So I know what it feels like to feel the depths of despair. And I know what it feels like to feel very, very, very good and grounded and just performing at a very high level. And so if I don't get 7, like last night, I got 8 hours of sleep, which is my kind of sweet spot baseline, 8.5 hours of sleep. I'm a completely different human being than 6.5. And I like feeling like that my mind works like that race car that just needs a certain type of fuel, which includes sleep for me. So I can get more done on a night that I've gotten a great night of sleep than a day in 3 hours, dude, than I can get done in all
Sure.
day on 6.5, even 7 hours of sleep. So I've made that connection. So then I've prioritized my sleep where I shut down. I'm getting up at 4:30, 5 a.m. without an alarm because I go to bed at 7:38. And again, I'm that guy. But we live in the country, we homeschool, they're not playing sports at late, and I go to bed when the kids go to bed, an hour and a half after the sun sets. So I'm in bed for 8 to 9 hours a night, and I prioritize that because I know that I perform at my best. But Bezos talks about the same thing. Buffett talks about the same thing. You look at a LeBron James, you look at these Roger Federer, the great athletes prioritize sleep. So I get more done in less time because I'm at my best. And then I trade off things like I don't care what's happening in the sports world. I don't care what's happening on Netflix. I just don't care. I want to be on the other side of the TV screen, if you will. You know, I want to create a life of meaning. I want to be the hero of my own story. So I've said no to a ton of stuff. And my joke to guys is, yeah, let me follow you around for a day. And let's see if we can find 10, 15, 30, 60, 90
Mm,
minutes where we can
yeah.
reprioritize a little bit. You know what I mean? And
It's always in
you
the
just need,
bathroom. Get out of the bathroom with your phone. That's what it is for me. If I leave my phone out of the bathroom, man, I'll recapture an hour of my day easy every day.
yeah. But again, we're going hard and we're blessed to love what we do, you know what I mean? And we just want to do more of it. But I've framed it up where I'm going to get more of what I want to get done by making sure I shut down and give myself a little window of time without the blue light. So I get into deep sleep faster, I stay there longer, I wake up feeling the way that I want to feel. Um, and then, you know, nutrition, it's a few simple levers, you know. Then we put that on autopilot and um the whole thing just becomes one big game, you know.
What about just that daily minutia, you know, the stuff that just comes up, you don't plan for, it's 15 minutes here, it's 5 minutes
Yeah, dude, look
there,
at
it's
me,
20
man.
minutes
Yeah,
here.
I'm at the dentist's office right now. So trust me, like, you know, I had put it off. I'm
Sure.
18 months out from the last appointment, you know, and so literally I'm living it right now. I'm gonna drive 90 minutes home. Here I am, not in my studio. Hey, well, there you go. But if I have to do anything, you know, Seneca said the wise man does nothing reluctantly. So, and Buddha said the same thing. You're gonna do anything, do it with all your heart. Like,
Mm.
so when I'm gonna do something, I radically accept it, then I'm all in. And then, you know, you can stack different things or whatever, but the reality is that's life. And then, you know, business wise, I'm blessed to have a team, and I'm really, really disciplined in doing what I and only I can do, and then leveraging the rest and empowering the team to do what they're great at, you know. And then it just is what it is. And I also try to use those moments as opportunities to appreciate things, you know. The DMV, you know, like we're blessed to have the lives we have, right? We go in there, we get this service, and easier said than done. And I had a fun experience with the passport office the other day. I'm like, wow, you
Same,
came in
same.
hot. Dude, I'm like 20 seconds in, and I'm like, I'm trying to be cool and, you know, like be all awesome. Like, oh, bless you. Wow, I'm the first appointment of your day, and we're already getting that heat. All right, cool. But it is what it is, you know, and we live in a life where we're so blessed, you know, and we can take it for granted or we can take it as granted. And the best among us, you know, remember to be grateful for the little things, especially when we find them annoying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, look, now that you say that, I'm thinking about what I was doing as I was waiting, 15, 20 minutes, which again is not a long time at the DMV. Yeah. Like I heard the person in front of me, they checked in at the window. They're like, do you have an appointment? The lady said no. And she's like, yeah, it's a 2 hour wait if you don't have an appointment. I'm like, oh, dang. And the guy's like, yeah,
that's
we'll
when you
wait.
bring
I'm
this
like,
guy. Let's go.
what? Like he actually waited. I was like, oh my gosh, like just go home and just make an appointment for tomorrow. But what I was gonna say is I was on my phone. I cleared out my entire email inbox.
Yep.
I followed up on all my social media DMs. I made a couple of gratitude texts and I was like, hey man, appreciate you for this, love you for this, thanks for this, thanks for that. I made a post on social media. So it's like it's not a complete waste
Yeah.
if, to the quote that you said earlier, and I wrote it down here, the wise man does nothing reluctantly. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And you
You,
stacked it up, you know, it is what it is. It's great.
I did some research. I always want to be researched as I talk with somebody and know who I'm talking with and what they're about. You said something that sounds really audacious and a little bit arrogant, honestly, and I'm really curious about your take on it when you say something like, by 2051, I want to be sure that 51% of humanity is flourishing. I'm like, what does that look like? How does that work? Like, what about people who I'm very pessimistic about that statement, but I want to give
Yep.
you an opportunity to explain it because I'm really curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So on one arm, I've got that tattoo. You can't see this, but on the other, I've got heroic. I actually got that from Martin Seligman, the founder of the positive psychology movement. So up until the year 2000, almost all the research on the science of well-being was on the negative stuff, depression, schizophrenia, et cetera. We could take someone from negative 10 to zero. In 2000, Martin Seligman, a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and some others founded the positive psychology movement. At that meeting in 2000, they created a moonshot goal for their movement. They wanted to help create the research that would help create a world in which 51% of humanity was flourishing by 2051. The first time I heard that like a decade ago, I thought it was crazy. I still think it's
Hmm.
crazy. And that's what I've dedicated my life to helping create. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I'm saying that I want to create, I want to play my role humbly, yet heroically well. I run a company called Heroic Public Benefit Corporation. Um, and I'm all in, dude. And I'm pessimistic about that, frankly. Yeah. I mean, you look at our world, just when you think it can't get any worse, the last 60 days happened. I mean, we live
Right.
in historically significantly chaotic times. But there's a science to it, and we do a lot of research on our app and the work we do with corporate clients and individuals. And there's a specific measure of flourishing. It's a simple scale that measures someone's well-being. And we know already that if you use our app, um, with some coaching we do with corporate clients, you'll go from the 53rd percentile of flourishing, which is average, to the 70th in 30 days. Um, but it's an incredible audacious statement that I got from him. And to me, it's not arrogant, it's humble because I got to show up every day, dude. And this is why I work my protocol as intensely as I do. Um, I'm all in, man. I mean, and you look at protector back there. You know what the word hero means in ancient Greece?
No, I don't.
It means protector. So in ancient
Really.
Greece, when they were coming up with a word for hero, dude, it wasn't tough guy or killer of bad guy. The word they came
Yeah.
up with was protector. So a
Mm.
hero has strength for two. A hero isn't a victim. A hero runs toward the sound of the. It wasn't gunfire in that point. But dude, we stand up. We do what we need to do to earn and forge that strength for two. And our secret weapon is love. We're committed to something bigger than ourselves, and I've dedicated my life to a mission that's going to force me to bring out the best in me. We've trained 10,000 coaches from 100 countries, and we're just getting going. But it's an insane goal. There's no question about that, and I hope it doesn't come across as egotistically arrogant. It's an audacious goal. I'm unapologetically ambitious in what I feel called to do, but it's not me. It's how do we, you and me, come together and be our best selves, iron sharpens iron, and how do we lead our communities well, and how do we do that in aggregate? And then we do have a shot. If we
Yeah.
can get millions of people lighten up to be the protectors, to be the individuals capable of leading, we can make a significant difference. There's no question in my mind. And we got 27 years to do it, so let's get to work, right?
Well, and I don't say it, and I hope it doesn't come across as I'm saying it as an indictment against you or anything like that. I'm just thinking to myself, probably similar to the way you saw it when you first read it. What does flourishing even mean? And you said there's some metrics. I'm really curious about what would be a metric of flourishing. I mean, you could talk about, financial capital. I would say overall maybe job satisfaction, probably some level of confidence, I imagine, is in there. But are there other metrics that determine what flourishing actually is?
Yeah, so then to step back, there's two different motivations, right? There's extrinsic and intrinsic. So extrinsic is what we've been seduced to go after: the fame, the wealth, and the hotness.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists say even if you are successful in pursuit of fame, wealth, and hotness, even if you are successfully pursuing them, you will be, quote, less psychologically stable than people pursuing intrinsic stuff. So flourishing is a measure of how well you're mastering the intrinsic stuff. Are you becoming a better person, which would involve purpose, confidence, all those other things? And then do you have deep personal relationships? Are you prioritizing that? Relationships and love is like, dude, some say that healthy life is love, full stop. And then are you making a contribution to your community? Not measured by Instagram followers or square footage
Mm-hmm.
in your house or whatever it is. So when we focus on those intrinsic motivators, which we can measure, do you feel that you're becoming a better person and mastering yourself and your craft? Do you feel like you're deepening relationships? Do you feel like you're making a contribution to your community? Those three things are going to be the cornerstones of a healthy, flourishing life. You can measure them and you can improve them. And this is my life's obsession: ancient wisdom, modern science. And we've done a lot of scientific research on our coach program and on our app with leading well-being researchers, randomized controlled studies that have proven the efficacy of what we're talking about right here. Because there's simple, fundamental things you can do that simply fundamentally change your life. But I get it, and I'm obviously skepticism is important, and just rational attunement to things that actually work and getting out of the rah pom pom waving. And for me, I keep on saying it, but it's ancient wisdom, modern science, practical tools. It needs to work or not. and you can scientifically measure these things on an individual level. And by definition, you'll affect change globally if we can do so in aggregate. But why I have an affinity to you is you're training heroes. That's literally what I'm committed to doing with heroic. We train heroes is what we do. Like that is one of our taglines. You know what I mean? Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
do the work. That's what
Yeah.
I'm seeing when I look at you and the order of man and sovereignty and what it means to be a true man and that healthy level of masculinity fully expressed in service to something bigger than ourselves. I mean, that is heroic, literally by definition.
Yeah, and look, I mean, even just to go back to skepticism, or even the word pessimism, which we both used, is like, I know there's a lot of people out there who they're pessimists just because, like, they like to stir the pot, and they you see him at work. Everybody knows the guy at work who's not really there to say, hey, let's let's red team this thing and figure out what's wrong with it so we can improve it. Let's just try to blow it up for the sake of destroying things or making people feel shitty. And that's the difference. Like, if more people were cautiously optimistic, maybe is a better phrase to use, and said, okay, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? How can we get there? What problems exist? What problems do we need to solve, and how can we solve them? That's significantly better than saying, that's stupid, that's not going to work, which is what,
Yep.
unfortunately, I think way too many men do.
Yeah. And then, I kind of look at it as like there's a bell curve, and there's always a virtuous mean. There's a vice of excess, just like there's a vice of deficiency. So if you have a healthy, virtuous level of optimism, um, you're not cynical, right? Nor are you Pollyanishly optimistic. Like this is a very
Right.
grounded sense of, well, what do I want? We talk a lot about targeted thinking in my work. So what do I want, right? And then what do I need to do to get it? And then there's a whole science to setting goals and achieving them, obviously, but it's different than what most people think. And the most important part of it is rubbing it up against reality. No naive optimism allowed. You've got to look at the
Mm,
obstacles, Stockdale Paradox style. You got to know you can achieve what you want, but you got to embrace reality. The more ruthlessly, the better. And then see what's in the way, what you're going to need to do to get over it. And then again, get to work paying the price. But I'm with you, dude, on the grounded optimism. And it's got to be rational. I mean, you have to actually believe that you can do it. I think it's on one side of impossible or the other. Well, it's not impossible. There's no question. It's not impossible. It's very close to it. But we got, you know, what else are we gonna do? You know what I mean? And then it starts with me. It starts
I
with
think
you. It starts
that's
with the individual listening, and it's like, all right, let's go.
that might be the best case that you can make right there. Like, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
That's it. Like, either you can be a good person and you can help people, or you can do the alternative and you can screw people over and you can take advantage of people and make people feel like garbage. So what do you want to do here? Like, there's
Yeah.
no case for the other option in my mind, anyways.
Yeah. And then let's go. Light the fire, activate, enter the forge. The subtitle of the book is Activate Your Heroic Potential. So there are 451 little micro chapters because it takes 451 degrees to ignite a fire. But then you got to get to 2200 degrees. You got to go from activation to the forge is 2200 degrees. That's where a sword is forged. And what I see in your work, that unapologetic intensity, that's not manic. We're not talking about ungrounded anything. There's a ferocious commitment to do the work, pull your load. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Conquer the fear and laziness is how my coach, Phil Stutz, puts it, quoting his favorite teacher, Rudolf Steiner. Two things getting in the way of us doing these things. It's fear and it's laziness. All right, well, let's get to work conquering both of those. And that's more than enough to keep us busy for a lifetime. So let's quit complaining about anyone else and anything else and get to work.
I'm glad that you did the 451 instead of the 2200 or whatever, because that just seems like way too many things to do on a
Five
daily
volumes, dude.
basis.
If I'm alive, it's volume one. So if I'm alive over the next 25 years, I hope to produce five more of them. But yeah, we'll start out small.
The thing I did like about the book, though, is if there's a particular, I wrote down there's 7 sections really, and so I'll pull out one of them, which is dominate the fundamentals, and in there might be 30 things that you can do, And maybe that's your struggle. Maybe you know that that's where you need to focus, and you don't need to read the entire book today, but you can pull out one of these items and say, all right, today I need to focus on showing up fully at work, or showing up fully for my daughter, or whatever it might be, right? And you can just pull out whatever you need to pull out based on where your integrity gap might be in any given moment on any given day.
That's exactly it. And I wrote it, it's a dense book, 1,000 pages, but each chapter is 1, 2, 3 pages long. So in and out, here you go. More wisdom and less time is kind of one of the things we've done. I've done with my work over the last 20 or so years, but that's right. You can open it up anywhere. We've got 7 objectives that I walk people through. And then within each of them, you can find, hopefully, an idea that can fire you up for that day. And you can read it while you're waiting at the DMV. You could have busted out 5 chapters there. Let's go. So super
I
simple, in
should
and
have done
out.
that.
Yeah.
I feel like
And you
an
get a
idiot
workout.
now. Maybe I should go back
Carrying
to
the
the
book around.
DMV
Let's
just
go.
so I
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah, you got a mobile office, man.
That's right. So you said your coach is Stutz. So he has that documentary. He's what's the guy's name? Jonah Hill, right? That's his therapist too, I think. And they did that documentary on Netflix that came out not too long ago.
Yeah, so it's called Stutz. He's kind of known as the Hollywood guy, but I found him after he wrote a book called The Tools, and I found it like
Okay.
10 years ago, and I'm like, this book's amazing. Wound up starting working with him 7 years ago. We've done 400 one-on-one sessions.
Really? Wow.
But
Okay.
yeah, kind of my spiritual father, and deep influence on me, but just a brilliant guy who has found a really practical way to apply these ideas we're talking about. And that movie was great because Jonah went to him. I go to him more for coaching, what he does is more coaching than anything. But Jonah talks about his own experience with his mental health challenges, and it's a great
Yeah.
movie. You got a therapist dropping F-bombs with Jonah Hill. It's a great way. Guys, all right, there you go. Like, it's okay to talk
they
about your
understand the
challenges,
market too.
but it's really important. The idea was to democratize and to destigmatize talking about these issues, so it's a
Yeah.
beautiful film in that regard, and a lot of practical guidance, but he's just a brilliant man that has deeply affected me.
I mean, especially for men too, you talk about the language. Occasionally I'll get guys who are like, oh, well, you shouldn't swear. And I actually agree with that. Like I try not to use profanity. I do occasionally, it slips out, just, part of my language. But also to the guys who are like, you shouldn't swear. I'm like, well, you wouldn't email me if I didn't. Like, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't right now. So, a few choice F-bombs, well-placed F-bombs aren't really going to hurt anybody. In fact, maybe it's just a jar that you need to start listening a little closer and applying something in your life.
That's great. Yeah, my joke is I'm Mr. Rogers in public because I want kids listening. I want,
Of course.
so many people, dude, just it becomes a thing, you know what I mean? It becomes another marketing hack of, yeah, I'm going to be the one that puts these words in book titles and stuff, and bless them, but we can do better than that, I mean, and again, then I'm also among friends. I can be a bit of a swashbuckling Navy SEAL language wise, but there's a time and place for everything, I think, and
Yeah.
knowing when and how to show up in integrity with who you are, I think, is super important. And it's a choice point, right? How do you want to express yourself? Is it a deliberate act, or is it kind of, you know what I mean, just flying off the handle kind of thing?
You said something earlier and I wasn't familiar with it. You said, I think what you said is Stockdale Paradox. Is that right? I wrote that down. Is that
Yeah.
right? What is that? I'm not familiar with
Yeah.
that.
Dude, so it's one of the micro chapters in the book. Jim Collins, my favorite business guy, he's just a brilliant guy. But James Stockdale
Is it Good
was,
to Great? Is that
yeah,
his
yeah,
book?
exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Good to great, great by choice, built to last, a bunch of different ones. Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0 is actually my favorite one of his books, as a side note,
Okay.
which is kind of the best of all that. But anyway, he interviewed James Stockdale back in the day. Vice Admiral James Stockdale was the commanding officer of the prisoner of war camp in Vietnam. So he was shot down early, and he was the commanding officer of all the prisoners of war during the
Hmm.
Vietnam War. And so
Okay.
he was also a practicing Stoic. So he had studied at Stanford, got a master's in something, and wound up falling in love with Epictetus. So when he was shot down, literally on the way down, dude, he's parachuting down and he's like, all right, I'm leaving the land of technology to the land of Epictetus 2,000 years ago. and he was immediately beaten and all this stuff. But rule number one of Stoicism is you have control over some things and you don't have control over other things. That's rule number one. The only things you have control over are your thoughts and your behaviors. So the Stockdale Paradox is this. So Stockdale was asked by Jim Collins, who survived the camps and who died? And he said, interestingly, reflecting on what you commented on before, he said the naive optimists died because the naive optimists thought they'd be freed, and they thought they'd be freed by like Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving came and went, and they're like, oh, well, Christmas, I'm going to be free. No, Christmas comes and goes, and shoot, they're not free yet. Okay, Easter, I'm going to be free by Easter. Anyway, they go through this naive optimistic, and then they just give up, and then they die. And he said the ones that survived were the ones that never gave up faith. They never lost hope that they would eventually be freed, but they also embraced the constraints of reality, the harsh reality that it was going to be years. And Stockdale said it's going to be at least 5 years. So he never gave up hope he'd be freed, but he also knew it was going to be insanely hard, and it took him 7 years to get freed. So that's the Stockdale Paradox. You never give up hope, but you embrace reality. And this is another thing we've been seduced, dude, to think it's supposed to be easy. So that's the most pernicious lie we've been told is you should have already achieved all the success you want. And oh, by the way, you went after the wrong things, fame, wealth, and hotness. You should have already had it, and it should be easy. So when you face problems, something's wrong with you. But you got to know it's supposed to be hard. That's rule number one of a good life, you know? Then you put in the effort, and you're not going to get fixed overnight. It's going to take you days and weeks and months and years to create the life you truly want, that you're truly proud of. But the good news is the moment you start living in integrity, you change the momentum and you start feeling more and more alive. But that's the Stockdale Paradox. I respect him and admire him. He's one of my heroes.
I actually have, now that you explain it, I have heard of that. I didn't know that it was the Stockdale Paradox, but I heard that if you're overly optimistic, like you said, you'd give up. But if you're a pessimist, then you're going to die. And it's those ones who are realistic about the situation, who don't give up hope. I have heard of that. I do want to challenge one thing you said, and only because I'm challenging it in my own thought process. And I'm curious as to what you say. You said it's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be hard. And, you know, I've gone through some of my own stuff over the past year and a half, and I see what a lot of other men are going through the work that we do. And I think that there's a lot of guys who believe that it only counts if it's hard. And so they'll make life harder than it needs to be, or they'll be overly harsh on themselves. And then they end up beating themselves into submission. And I think I kind of did that to myself. And that's part of the reason I turned to alcohol as a way to escape and cope and all of that stuff. And there's a whole other story there, but beating myself into submission instead of affording myself some grace and allowing myself to learn. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are I want you to push back on everything because this is such a good conversation. And those are two different things. To recognize that life is inherently hard is different than shaming yourself and all of that stuff. And from my vantage point, when we actually embrace just how hard life is, you give yourself a lot more grace. And you realize, dude, I'm not alone. Everybody's struggling right now. So it's okay that I'm one of the individuals struggling. And there's a science of self-compassion that's really important that I talk about a lot in my work. So self-compassion has three components. Number one, and this is a science, and the opposite of self-compassion is shame. Shame is a decent seasoning. It's not a 0%. You want to have a certain level, 1, 2, 3%, maybe a little salt, you know what I mean? A little salt and pepper on the overall main dish where you want to be properly holding yourself to high standards. But 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80%, dude, you don't eat that. So you want to sprinkle it in. So the opposite of shame is self-compassion. The first thing you need to do is what they call common humanity. So if you think you're the only one experiencing life's challenges, you're going to shame yourself more. You're not going to give yourself grace. No, you're not alone. Every single human being across history, all cultures has experienced the challenges you're facing. It's not because it's because you're human, is how one of my other coaches put it back in the day. That gave me so much freedom, dude, because that's when I used to really beat myself up. I thought it was me. I thought I had a character flaw, something was inherently wrong with me, versus what BJ Fogg says it's not a character flaw, it's a design flaw. You haven't been taught how to live a good life. So what if you were taught how to do these things? And just because you failed over and over and over at changing behaviors doesn't mean you're a loser. It means you had a losing strategy. Let's build a better designed strategy. So common humanity, and then you got to be nice to yourself. Push yourself, but do it like you would your 7-year-old basketball team. I know you're not that guy. There are coaches that are
Sometimes
those guys.
depends. It depends. Sometimes
I
those
got
little
you. Yeah,
turds,
but I
sometimes
got
those
you,
little
man.
turds deserve what they get
Those
from me.
little
No,
turds get a
I'm
little
just
bit of
kidding.
heat. I get it. Dad turns up the heat. Let's go. But even that's done with a level of love. You know what I mean?
Of course, of
So
course.
you're kind to yourself is the point. And then the third thing is you got to notice when you're not being kind to yourself or when you think it's just you. That's the science of self-compassion. You absolutely must give yourself grace, and you simultaneously must hold yourself to high standards. Then you shine a flashlight on what's working in your life and what's not. Then you bring a hammer to what needs work and what you're going to do differently. So it's a really important conversation. And then when you get that, it all becomes fun. So if I'm going up Mount Everest, I'm not bitching about the weather. I know the weather's going to be tough. So
Of
when I get
course.
hammered with health or relationship or work challenges, I don't complain. I laugh, literally personally, I laugh and say the heroic gods are blessing us with an awesome challenge right now. Thank you for the storm. Boom, time for me to practice my philosophy. Epictetus
Mm,
said, when life gives you challenges, act as if the gods have given you an Olympic wrestler and you want to be your best. So you've got this young wrestler to go up against. Those are your challenges. That's the attitude we want to bring. I'm not saying you should suffer. I'm saying the pain is inevitable. Your suffering is optional, but it's your resistance to the pain that is creating the suffering, right? This is a whole nother conversation. When I can embrace it, I can use it. I can use it as fuel, the same way you use the weights in your gym to get stronger. You don't lift styrofoam weights in life. You lift real weights. Well, that's what your challenges are. And when you approach them that way, aka life's supposed to be challenging or hard, you smile and you bring it on, even in the midst of getting hammered. There's a certain subtle, the Everest dudes, there are moments where you're like, oh my God, I might get blown off the mountain. Well, you're focused, you know what I mean? But there's also this is what I signed up for. This is what I've trained for. I want to be a protector. I want to be a
yeah.
hero for my kids and for my partner and for my team and my community, et cetera. And life takes on a deeper um, meaning as we provide and as we protect and do all the other things.
I heard somebody, I wish I could remember who told me because it was really powerful. They would run an exercise in a group environment and they would say that they want the participants to write down all of the negative things they think about themselves. So I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'm a bad dad, I'm a drunk, I've gone through bankruptcy, and just write all the things they think horribly about themselves. And then when they have that list, what they do is they then partner each other up with other people. And they say, I want you to take that list and I want you to read it like as if you and I were partnered, I have to read this and say, Brian, you're a loser. You're a horrible person. You are a pile of shit. And people can't do it, of course,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
they're not gonna say that to somebody else.
Yep.
And it's an exercise in how harsh we are with ourselves, but how generous, I think, for the most part,
Yeah.
we will be with other people, but we won't. I
Yep.
think I think this is especially true for men. We won't
Yep.
be that generous or kind to ourselves.
Dude, goosebumps. I mean, we're just getting to know each other, but just to feel you, like if I simply treated myself the way I would treat you, a guy that I really respect and admire, just getting to know you, you know what I mean? But like to your point, I would never say that even to a stranger.
Of
So to be able to
course.
step back, but that takes the wisdom and the discipline and the love and the courage in that moment. This is Arete again. So in the moment in which you start shaming yourself and start doing all those things you would never do to a friend, step back because in that moment you're capable of being more. So again, the algorithm works. If this, then Arete. If this, then Arete. It's the ultimate algorithm that answers all of life's questions. What's the best you could do right now? It is never, oh yeah, reminding yourself that you are that, whatever person you're ashamed of, all these different things that it's a discipline to notice when you're doing those things and to stop it. Right.
Yeah.
And again, to make it a game. And it's hard to put into words how exciting it becomes. And the Stoics were joyful. The Stoics learned how to control the negative thoughts and behaviors that allowed them to have a life of deep meaning and purpose and lightness. There's a lightness that comes into your life when you are, again, closing that integrity gap, knowing you're never going to do it perfectly. But they called it eudaimonia, which again means good soul. You have this little daimon, this little guiding spirit that the Romans called your genius. In Roman times, everyone had a genius, just like in Greece they called it your daimon. The diminutive of daimon is demon. So we also
Mm.
always have a demon, daimon. Those voices are barking at us all day, every day. We just need to slow down, talk to the daimon more and more consistently, live in integrity with what they're telling us to do, and then you experience a quote good soul, eudaimonia, and that feels great, even in the midst of when it doesn't feel great. There's something deeper than happiness. That's that joyful sense of I'm doing my best in my current reality. You know what I mean? That we've all felt that when we do that, our worst days can become our best days. Still having highs and lows, but those highs become sustainably higher. The lows get scaffolded up so we don't go off the rails when
Right.
life inevitably gets hard, you know?
Is that concept of daimon and demon, is that would that be the equivalent of in Christianity, the spirit of God versus Satan, or is that something
100%.
different? Okay.
100%. Dude, I was raised Catholic. Look, I'm a good end of the day, uh yes, that's exactly it. And you can call it whatever you want to call it. We each have
Sure,
our
right.
own, wisdom and faith traditions. My thing is, are you living in integrity with it? If we were at home, on my studio, I've got all my heroes behind me. My wife's right behind me. My kids are next to me. And then I've got Aurelius and Epictetus. I've got Gandhi and Churchill, Eleanor Roosevelt, but I've got Jesus on the upper left. And that's exactly right. And again, what would Jesus do? Well, that's an unbelievably powerful reflection exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It's an
Mm-hmm.
ancient Stoic practice too. Think of your ideal sage, that individual that embodies the qualities you want to embody. Okay, what would they advise you to do? I do it every morning in my meditation practice. I invoke my heroes and my guides to give me guidance for that day. And you know, if we lived in integrity with that, we'd be doing pretty well. What would Jesus do? There's always that
Yeah.
he's your daimon right there, always present. If that's your guide, but that's exactly right. We have that guiding spirit and the less than helpful spirit within.
Yeah, we can even, and I don't want to take Jesus or God out of the equation, because I'm a man of faith as well, and so I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm about to say. But you could also do that with yourself. So you could say, for example, if you're confronted with a crisis, let's say you get into a bit of a road rage or an altercation on the road, you could ask yourself something as simple as, what would the guy that I want to be do in this situation? Like if it was the guy that I wanted to be, like that I looked up to, that I wanted to be in 5 years, what would that guy do? And then you can
Oh,
do that. It's so simple.
dude, that's it. And scientists actually say that's the fastest way to get clarity on your, they call it a best self diary. To think about it.
Mm.
You in 5 years, you're your best version. Matthew McConaughey says his conception of a hero is the version of him he's chasing, always chasing. So that's a brilliant question, is all right, what would the guy that I aspire to be do, and how do I make him proud? And this is where these things are not chores. They're gifts you're giving to your future self, because your choices you're making right now and right now and right now are affecting you in an hour, in a day, in a week, in a month. So give a gift to your future self that your future self is going to look back at and say, thank you, dude. Perfect. We turned it around. It's unfortunate it took us as long as it did, but here we go. Now we're starting the forward motion. But that's exactly right. And that's my whole life, is connect to something bigger than yourself, which is connected to the ultimate best self. And then those basic things: eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, focusing, um, somewhat paradoxically, are the most direct conduit to our best selves. Because if you're tired and your energy sucks because you're making bad lifestyle choices, it's very difficult to ask and get clarity on those questions. But when you take control of those simple controllables, everything takes on a different energy and velocity.
Yeah, man, that's powerful stuff. Well, admittedly, and in full disclosure, I don't have a copy of your book yet. Your team is going to, because we made this
Yeah.
happen so quick. Your team
Yeah.
messaged me and they said, "Hey, we've got something in the mail for you." But I
Yep.
went through your website and your app, and I'm like, this looks
Yeah.
awesome. So as soon as we're done, I'm actually going to sign up for it and go through it, because I think there's a lot that I could value from. seeing, you know, the different objectives and everything in there. So, and every once in a while I have a conversation like this where I really connect with who I'm talking with. I learned something from everybody, but man, I've enjoyed this conversation. If you would just tell the guys where to pick up a copy of the book. You talked about the Heroic app, the website, anything that you want to talk about and mention to direct the men to, please feel free to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to connecting on the other side of this too. I'd love to tell you more about the app, and I appreciate you making this happen so fast. And I can't wait to get you the book and all the other things, and we'll hook you up with the app too. So we'll connect on the other side. But Arete, Arete, you can get the book anywhere you get books. And then heroic.us is the website for our Heroic app. You can also find the app in your iOS and Android app stores. The basic idea there is I spent half of the last 25 years reading great books and distilling them into little summaries. We call them philosopher's notes, 20-minute summaries of 650 of the best books, ancient wisdom, modern science. You know, people are too busy to read, right? But whether it's Jocko or, you know, Angela Duckworth, we talked about, fill in the blank on your favorite teacher. I've probably featured the book. I need to get yours in there. But that's the Heroic app. Then we also help you move from theory to practice to mastery, getting clarity on who you are at your best, and then recommitting to being that best version of yourself every single day. But that's Heroic and Arete. And dude, I'm just thrilled to be connected. I really appreciate your support, admire who you are, what you're doing, and honored to be here training some heroes together.
Likewise, man, the feeling's mutual. So I appreciate you. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for the work that you're doing. We got a lot of we got a lot of work. 51% of humanity flourishing by 2051. We got a lot of work to do. I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining me today.
All right, brother. Likewise.